sometime in 1992.
Hello, Mike Hager here.
Hee, Mr. Haggard. So pleased to make your acquaintance. I believe you know who I am. Don't hang up. We have a little business proposition for you. Your daughter for your cooperation. And we'll throw in the regular monthly bonus to your salary we offered before.
What? What happened to Jessica?
And welcome back to Game Escape, here today with a review of Final Fight CD for the Sega CD. And I just actually found this game. I had it growing up. It was one of my favorite Sega CD titles that I owned, and it went missing from probably the mid-90s until literally today. Was going through a box of old VCR tapes, and there it was, just laying loose there on the bottom, not too scratched up, and I just started playing it, and it brought back some really, really terrific memories. The game was released in 1993 for the Sega CD, and it was probably one of the reasons why I wanted the system to begin with. I kind of have a complex history with that add-on. I'll kind of go into that in another video, but let's just say when it was announced I had really, really high hopes, and this game was almost, to me, a justification of the potential of that system. And I think it is probably the best home port of the classic 1989 arcade game Final Fight. And the reason for that is that we have, if you played the SNES version, you'll remember that you couldn't do the co-op, and it only had two characters. I think Guy was not playable. There were not a lot of enemies on screen, and it really felt compromised. This game allows you to pick from all three characters. They kind of enter and exit the stages as they did in the arcade game, and the music is just terrific. And this is one of those games, for those who are old enough, if you sort of remember back to the advent of CD technology in video games with these add-ons like the TurboGrafx-16 CD system, the Sega CD. You know, everyone likes to laugh at the full motion video, but it really was cool to play, you know, a classic looking 16-bit game with just a crystal clear, awesome soundtrack. And that's what this game was. You know, the soundtrack is just a terrific remix of the arcade music, and it kind of, there was a certain beauty to games like that. You know, the Sega CD, I think, ultimately never was the graphical powerhouse that perhaps we thought it might be. Those of us who were really into the system and couldn't wait to get it home. But, you know, I think there was a certain beauty to that classic 16-bit art style with the new engaging soundtrack. And if you just want to, you know, go onto YouTube and just dial it up, really some great sound. So what I thought I'd do is just compare this for you. I'll play a clip from the arcade version, the SNES version, and the Sega CD version. So that was the arcade version. Now have a listen to the SNES version. And of course, you know, the soundtrack is classic, and the Super NES game, you know, it was a fair reproduction of that. You know, it was released in 1990 in Japan, 91 in North America, and again, this game came out a little bit later, but listen to the Sega CD version of the Level 1 music. really was revolutionary back in 1993. Picking this up, finally having as close to the complete arcade game as possible in your home, and then having that just awesome remixed soundtrack that almost drove you through these levels. You know, you wanted to explore the game again and just hear all of this terrific music. So the game itself, you know, it is, I think, the quintessential beat-em-up game, arcade beat-em-up game, and that's, you know, that might be disputed, because you have, obviously, the great Konami games, Ninja Turtles, the X-Men game, the Simpsons game, but, you know, there's just something about Final Fight that, if you remember it back in the arcade, it really felt mature. In '89, you had the weapons, you had the knives, you had the, you know, the Poison Ivy, Roxy characters, you know, prostitute characters, and it felt gritty and violent in such a cool way. And of course, I loved Mike Hager. I thought he was just, you know, I love the fact that he, you know, had the wrestling moves, and he kind of looked like, almost like a Dan Severn, if you remember that, like the Ultimate Fighter, back in the, I guess, the early 90s, mid-90s, I guess he became somewhat famous. And then, you know, fighting the Andore, like the Andre the Giant from the 70s character. It was just, so much of it was so cool. The controls, you know, they were simple, they were effective, you know, jump and attack button, and then based on your position, you could, you know, if you were Hager, you could do some, like, suplexes and grappling moves, and then of course if you hit both the jump and strike button at the same time, you could do the special move. Really simple, almost crude in a way. I mean, there wasn't necessarily a ton of strategy. Basically, you wanted to kind of move away from your opponents, and, you know, with that distance, you know, then attack. You didn't want them to gang up on you, strike you with the weapons and things like that. But, you know, I think the genre was also fairly simple, and this game, you know, the combat felt the most realistic for the time. Graphically, this version of the game is pretty good. Like I said, you know, you had all of the characters, or not all of the characters from the arcade game, but more of the characters than the SNES version, and of course you could play with Guy, Cody, and Mike Hager, which you couldn't do. I mean, these are Sega Genesis graphics, ultimately, but they look crisp and clean, and actually this video is not doing it total justice, because I really can't capture directly from the Sega Genesis, Sega CD. For whatever reason, it comes out black and white, so I'm playing this disc through an emulator, and it doesn't look as good as it does when you're sitting in front of the old school CRT television and playing this game. Although I did have it hooked up to, you know, my pretty good computer speakers, and the sound was absolutely awesome. So if you can run the audio out from the Sega CD into a receiver or something, it is going to sound absolutely terrific. But, you know, this is nothing to write home about graphically, but it certainly does the job, and the gameplay is there from the arcade version. And beyond that, the only other difference or novelty in the Sega CD version is a time attack mode, where you pick a character. You're actually pretty cool stage. You're sort of on a bridge overlooking Metro City, and you just have to fight all of the characters in the game within, I believe it's 60 minutes. So it's pretty challenging to get through it with 1 or 2 lives. But other than that, it's a very, very faithful port of an awesome game, and it made me feel, certainly in 1993, where this game was still in the arcades, and it was still, you know, even 3-4 years after its release, it was, you know, it still had that grit and that, I don't want to say realism, but just that sense of impact and coolness, and to have it home on the Sega CD was a really, really awesome experience. So if you've got a Sega CD out there, or you want to play it on an emulator, as I was doing for this this review, definitely worth it if you're a fan of the game. It's a little expensive. I was just looking it up. Loose, it's going to run you about $15 to $20, and complete, we're in the $70 to $100 range. But it really is just such an awesome version of the game, and the soundtrack will definitely keep you playing. So I may actually, if this works out and you guys find it interesting, I may actually delve a little bit deeper into my Sega CD games, at least the ones I found, and do some more reviews. So Final Fight, highly recommended. Check it out if you have a Sega CD. And as always, thank you for watching Game Escape, and I will see you shortly with a new video.
Guy, Jessica was kidnapped.
Jessica?
My sweetheart since childhood.
The Mad Gear must pay. She's my friend too. Count me in.